A blind 12-year-old walked into a masterclass full of prodigies, got mocked by a famous pianist, and then played something so powerful, the room forgot how to breathe. You ever meet a kid who doesn't need to see the world to understand it? That was Torian Breyer, just 12 years old, born blind, but somehow he noticed more than most people with perfect vision. He could tell when someone was lying by the way their breath shifted. He remembered the way different shoes sounded on concrete. And when it came to music, Torian didn't just hear it, he felt it. He lived with his aunt Jolene in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Birmingham, Alabama. Jolene worked night shifts cleaning surgical rooms at a hospital and picked up shifts wherever she could. She didn't have time to sugarcoat life, but she loved that boy like he was her own. His mother, Jolene's younger sister, had passed during childbirth. No father had ever shown up. So it was just the two of them, and every month was a stretch. They didn't have much. Their kitchen floor tiles peeled at the corners, the couch had springs that poked through, and their heater never worked right in the winter. But there was a tiny Yamaha keyboard that sat on a fold-out table by the window. That thing had missing keys and a duct-taped wire, but to Torian, it was his whole universe. He'd wake up before school, slip his headphones on and practice. No lessons, no sheet music, just instinct. Some days it was an old church hymn. Other times it was jazz he picked up from an old radio station. Most times it was something he made up on the spot. Sounds that didn't follow rules but made people stop and listen. The local community center had a dusty, upright piano. The keys were sticky and a few were chipped, but Torian begged to play it whenever Jolene took him there. Sometimes he'd lose track of time. Other kids would gather around, whispering like they were watching something they didn't know how to name. It wasn't just that he played well, it was how he played. The kind of sound that made grown men blink too hard. One afternoon, as he ran his fingers along a slow blues line, Ms. Carver, the after-school tutor, watched from the hallway. She'd always kept an eye on Torian. She'd seen kids like him before, kids who carried their pain in silence. But what struck her most wasn't the pain. It was the way he transformed it. She crouched beside him that day and said, "Torian, who taught you to do that?" He shrugged. "Ain't nobody teach me. I just play what I hear. Sometimes what I feel." "And what are you feeling right now?" He tilted his head and smiled. "Like the notes are trying to say what my mouth can't." It was the kind of thing that sticks with you. Ms. Carver didn't say much more, but that night she looked up something she'd heard about. A world-renowned pianist named Alistair Duveau was coming to town for a youth masterclass. It was supposed to be for elite students, the kind with private tutors, connections, and parents who wrote checks with 4 zeros. Kids from schools that had music wings bigger than the entire community center. But the application didn't cost anything, so she filled one out for Torian behind his back. No videos, just a short audio clip she recorded on her phone. Him playing a song he had made up one rainy Thursday when he thought no one was listening. But what came next wasn't what anyone expected. The letter came 2 weeks later. It was a glossy envelope, thick paper, gold trim. The kind of envelope you don't usually see in mailboxes with rusted hinges and chipped paint. Ms. Carver knocked on Jolene's door after work, still in her navy blue scrubs. Torian was at the kitchen table, head tilted toward the radio, humming along to something faint and off-key. Jolene squinted at the envelope. "It's not a bill. That's already strange." Miss Carver smiled. "It's from the Birmingham Conservatory." Jolene raised an eyebrow. "You signing my nephew up for something I need to know about?" "Just open it." Jolene slid her finger under the seal, read the first few lines. Then she paused. Her eyes skimmed the rest in silence. She looked at Torian, then back at the paper. "They want him to perform? In front of who?" "In front of Alistair Duveau. He's hosting a masterclass. Big deal. Real fancy. Only a dozen kids got picked. Your boy's one of them." Torian looked up, confused. "Who's Alistair?" Miss Carver sat down next to him. "He's French. Wears tight suits. Real serious. He's one of the best classical pianists in the world. Plays in Vienna, Tokyo, Paris. Sells out halls with balconies taller than trees. Well, let's just say he doesn't usually come to this part of town. Torian leaned in. Why would he want me? He doesn't know it's you yet, she said carefully. They picked the audio submission. They don't know anything else. There was a silence. Jolene spoke first. So you mean, once they see him? Miss Carver cut her off gently. Then we let the music speak for itself. It was a strange week after that. Torian didn't talk much about the invitation. He practiced more, but not obsessively. He didn't know what to expect, so he didn't expect anything. Jolene, though, was restless. She borrowed a dress shirt from a neighbor, cleaned his sneakers with a toothbrush, even cut his hair herself with shaky hands. You're gonna go in there and make them listen, she told him one night. No matter what they think they see. The day of the event, the three of them took the city bus. Ms. Carver met them at the station with a to-go bag of biscuits and water bottles. Eat something. This place don't believe in snacks. The conservatory was in downtown Birmingham, near the business district. Big glass windows, manicured hedges, marble floors inside. The kind of building where people's voices automatically drop to a whisper. As soon as they entered, the difference hit hard. The other kids were already there. Polished shoes, designer blouses, parents with clipboards and leather bags. Some were warming up on electric keyboards they'd brought along. One girl had a custom pink metronome shaped like a swan. Another boy, tall and nervous, was doing finger stretches while his mother rubbed his shoulders. Torian didn't speak, but he could hear it. The rustle of expensive fabric, the careful words, the way laughter never reached the back of anyone's throat. He stood still, cane tapping gently until Ms. Carver whispered, "We're right behind you, kid. Don't worry about them." Then came the voice. "Who's he?" It was a low, European-accented drawl. Alistair Duveau had entered from a side hallway. Tall, silver hair swept back, wearing a dark, tailored suit that looked like it cost more than Torian's aunt made in a month. His assistant leaned in and whispered something. Alistair glanced at Torian's cane, then his worn sneakers. He smirked. Let's not waste the piano on charity cases, shall we?" The words weren't loud, but they were loud enough. A few of the students laughed under their breath. Some parents looked away. Miss Carver took a step forward, but Jolene grabbed her arm, shaking her head. Torian just stood still. Face blank. "Can I still play?" he asked quietly. Alistair blinked, surprised he'd heard. The pianist waved a hand without looking. "Fine, if we have time." But something shifted in that room, and no one realized it yet. The masterclass began in a recital hall with curved wooden walls that bounced the sound just right, the kind of room that made even a whisper feel important. The grand piano sat at the front, a Steinway, polished like black ice. A velvet rope circled the instrument. Only students on the roster could pass. Alistair stood near the bench like a king by his throne. The first student, a boy named Camden from St. Augustine, Florida, performed a technically flawless Debussy prelude. Clean, smooth, precise. Alistair gave a brief nod, offered cold, clipped advice, and motioned for the next. One by one the kids played. Some were better than others. Some were scared stiff. Others too proud for their skill level. But every single one of them had 2 working eyes, a private teacher, and a family with money. Torian waited. No one had told him where his slot was. The assistant kept skipping past his name on the list. Jolene sat in the second row with her hands clenched in her lap, eyes hard. Ms. Carver hadn't blinked in minutes. 3 hours passed. It was now past noon. The last scheduled performer had finished, a girl named Leona from Baton Rouge, who'd played a passionate Chopin nocturne. The room applauded politely. Alistair checked his watch. "And that concludes—" Torian raised his hand. Alistair blinked at him, eyebrows lifting slightly. "Yes? You said, if there was time. Can I still play?" There was a pause. Not silence. A pause. The kind of beat where grown people hold their breath to see if someone's going to do something stupid or brave. Alistair exhaled slowly, then gestured. "Very well." The room didn't know where to look. Some parents exchanged glances. A boy near the back snickered under his breath. Torian stood, cane tapping lightly. Ms. Carver walked him down the aisle. He counted steps by rhythm, 7 steps to the stairs, 3 up, 4 to the bench. His hand brushed the wood of the Steinway, smooth and cold. "Sit," Alistair said. "Let's see what we're working with." Torian adjusted his seat slowly. His left shoe tapped twice on the pedal to check resistance. Then he rested his hands on the keys. They were different than what he was used to, heavier, more reactive. But he didn't flinch. He exhaled, and he played. Not a piece from a book, not something polished for judges. It started low, soft, 3 notes with aching space between them. Then the left hand came in, dragging sorrow behind it like a shadow. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't perfect. It was real. The right hand climbed, searching. Then a sharp chord, unexpected, raw, the kind that makes a room forget how to breathe. He wove blues with classical flourishes, bending the melody like it hurt. The middle section collapsed into minor dissonance, almost like arguing with itself, before swinging upward into a hopeful run that sounded like sunrise. You didn't need to know music to feel it. It was loss, rage, love, and survival, all in one. When the last note hit, it didn't ring. It hung, then silence. No applause, just disbelief. Even Alistair's face, a man known for controlling every blink, had cracked. His mouth opened slightly. No one spoke. A girl near the front wiped her cheek without realizing she was crying. Torian didn't smile. He just turned his face toward the audience. "I call it Where I Live When It's Quiet." Jolene stood. She didn't clap. She just said, "That's my nephew," and that was enough. But someone had recorded everything, and by nightfall, the internet would be watching too. The clip went online before Torian even got home. One of the students, a quiet kid from Tulsa named Eli, had pulled out his phone during the performance. He hadn't planned to record the whole thing, but when Torian started playing, he forgot to stop. The boy uploaded it to a small classical piano group on social media with the caption, "This blind kid just stunned everyone at the Duvo masterclass. Watch till the end." Within 6 hours, the video had crossed 50,000 views. By midnight, it was closing in on 1 million. But Torian didn't know any of that. He was sitting on his mattress on the floor, still in the clothes he'd worn to the conservatory. His fingers were laced in his lap, and his aunt was heating leftovers in the kitchen. Miss Carver sat at the little table, scrolling through her cracked phone screen like it had turned to gold. "Kid," she said softly, "you need to hear something." Torian tilted his head. "Another message?" She turned the volume up and held it near his ear. It was a clip of him playing, distorted slightly by the phone mic, but unmistakably him. You could hear a girl gasp in the background. Then silence. Then someone whispering, "What did I just hear? People are sharing it?" He asked. "Not just sharing," Miss Carver said. "They're talking about it. Journalists, music blogs. Some composer in Seattle wants to contact you. And," she looked at Jolene, who had walked over holding a plate, "someone from the conservatory called, said they'd like to offer you lessons. Free, with transportation." Jolene sat down. Slow. They didn't want to waste the piano before. "Well now," Miss Carver said. "They're begging for a seat beside it." Torian didn't say anything. He leaned back against the wall, listening to the heater clank in the corner, to the distant sound of a siren outside, to the way the world had turned since that morning. "I didn't play it for them," he said. "I played it for me. And that's why it hit different," Jolene said. The next day, the news spread wider. Clips appeared on national morning shows. One headline read, "Blind Alabama Kid Silences Masterclass with Original Piece That Broke Every Rule." Another one said, "Alistair Duvo left speechless by teen pianist he almost ignored." Duvo's name was in the mix now, and not in the way he liked. People started pointing out his comment. The internet is good at remembering cruelty, even when it's casual, even when it's quiet. A reporter called his team for comment. They declined, said he had no statements at this time. But at the conservatory, something strange happened. People started talking about Torian without whispering. A music professor replayed the clip during a lecture on emotion in performance. A local jazz artist reached out and offered to mentor him. Even the mayor's office sent a message asking if he'd be willing to perform at the upcoming city festival. But Torian, he kept going to the community center. Same piano, same cracked bench, same chipped keys. He didn't want to leave it behind. One day while he was playing, a woman came in during the middle of a piece. She was quiet, sat in the back, didn't speak until he stopped. "You wrote that?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "What key was it in?" He thought for a moment. "I don't know. I don't think about it like that." She stepped forward, her voice soft. "That's how I used to write when I was your age." Turned out she was Monique Sevier, an old blues pianist from Louisiana who'd played with legends in the 80s. She offered to teach him how to write his music down, not to change how he played, just to help him remember it, protect it, shape it. "I can't give you eyes," she said, "but I can give your songs a spine." But the real test wasn't behind him. It was waiting at the front of the same room where it all started. By the time the third week passed, Torian's name had made its way into homes that didn't even know how to pronounce Birmingham. His face, the one people kept cropping from a still frame of the video where his fingers hovered above the keys, had become a symbol. Some called him a prodigy. Others called him a miracle. He didn't call himself anything. He still walked the cracked sidewalks to the corner store to buy canned peaches. Still tied his shoelaces slow, using the same double-loop trick his aunt taught him at 5. Still sat at the community center piano and let the keys lead him, not the other way around. But outside his world, things moved fast. The video had passed 10 million views. People started reaching out. One producer in Los Angeles offered to fly Torian out to appear on a talk show. A streaming service emailed Jolene about a short documentary. Even the conservatory, the same one that once forgot to list his name, offered him a scholarship for private lessons and a formal music education. Jolene wasn't sure how to answer any of it. She still made her way to work every night, walking through the hospital's back entrance and praying the vending machine didn't eat her last dollar. Ms. Carver helped where she could, answering emails, keeping track of the offers. But she reminded Torian every day, don't let the noise become louder than the music. One afternoon, they got a call from the conservatory director himself, Dr. Shiloh Brennett. His voice was firm but polite, said he wanted to clear the air. He invited them back, not as applicants, but as guests of honor at an upcoming gala for the city's music program. Said it was important Torian be there. Symbolic, he called it. Jolene hung up the phone and stared out of the window. They want you now, she said. Because they have to, not because they believe in you. Torian sat at the table, his fingers tracing invisible patterns on the wood. Does it matter why? There was no easy answer. The gala was held at the same recital hall, same polished floors, same velvet ropes. But this time, Torian's name was printed on the program, in bold letters, right at the top. He wore a simple suit Ms. Carver found at a thrift store uptown. Someone had tailored it just enough to fit. His sneakers, freshly cleaned, still had the same faded stripe from when he first wore them to that master class. People greeted him at the entrance, smiled too wide, spoke too fast, called him incredible, gifted, a national treasure, but their hands shook when they tried to guide him, not because of who he was, but because they knew who they hadn't seen him as just weeks ago. Dr. Brennett approached halfway through the night. We're honored you came, Torian, he said. We'd like to offer you a full academic track. You'll be mentored by faculty, participate in statewide competitions. It's all covered. Torian's head tilted slightly. Will I still be allowed to play what I feel? Brennett paused. Of course, with guidance. He nodded. I'll think about it. The offer was real. So was the applause when he was introduced. So was the look on Jolene's face. Pride, fear, and the kind of protectiveness that can't be trained out of someone who's had to fight for everything. But Torian's heart wasn't inside that room. It was still with the kids who stood behind him at the community piano, waiting for their turn, with the songs he hadn't written yet, with the people who didn't need cameras to notice him. That night, on the way home, he asked Jolene, "Do you think they mean it? Or just feel bad?" She answered without looking. "Some people change their hearts. Others just change their tone." He thought about that for a while, but the past wasn't finished with him yet, because the one person who hadn't said a word was the one who started it all. It was a chilly Friday morning when the second masterclass was announced. The same location, the same format, and, surprisingly, the same host, Alistair Duveau. The conservatory tried to frame it as tradition, due to the overwhelming success of last year's event, but behind the curtain, people whispered other reasons. Duveau's team had been under pressure ever since that video. Music forums dragged him for the charity case remark. A few called for him to be dropped from concert lineups. He stayed silent. No apology, no interview, just silence. Until now. The conservatory director reached out again. "Torian, we'd like you to be part of it, as our featured guest." Jolene's jaw clenched so tight she had to leave the room, but Torian simply asked, "Will he be there?" "Yes," the director said. "You'll share the same stage." Torian nodded slowly. "Then I want to come." Ms. Carver blinked. "You sure?" He tilted his head. "I think he needs to hear something." A week later, the hall looked almost identical. Same rows of cushioned chairs, same polished floor, but the mood had shifted. This time, everyone knew who Torian was, and they didn't dare underestimate him. He didn't dress up, no suit, no tie, just jeans, a clean shirt, and those worn sneakers. Jolene, sitting in the second row again, wore the same expression as the first time. Alert, steady, watching every move. Alistair entered 10 minutes late. No smile. Just a small nod to the director and a quick scan of the room. His eyes landed on Torian. Held for half a second, then moved on. The program was brief. A handful of young pianists, mostly returning students, technically sharp, well-practiced. But the room was waiting for only one moment. Torian's. The director took the mic. "This young man doesn't need an introduction, but he deserves one. He reminded us that music doesn't ask where you come from, only who you are. Please welcome Torian Breyer." No clapping, just standing. Every single person rose to their feet. He walked calmly to the piano, hand brushing the edge to orient himself. No cane this time. He sat, adjusted the bench, then paused. Not to collect himself, to listen. The audience leaned in. He placed his hands on the keys, not like a performer, but like a friend returning to a conversation. Then he played. It wasn't a big, showy piece. It was simple. A slow waltz. Each note hung like a breath being held. Then came fragments, little glimpses of the blues, gospel shadows, whispered grief, laughter hidden in major chords. He stitched his memories into music. Every skipped name, every closed door, every night spent with only sound for company. It was beautiful, and it was directed at one man in the room. When the final note faded, Torian stood. He didn't bow, didn't wait for applause. He turned toward Alistair. "Mr. Duveau," he said. "Thank you." A few heads turned, confused. "Because if you hadn't doubted me that day, I might have kept playing in the dark." There was no anger in his voice, just clarity. Alistair stared at him. Face unreadable. For a moment it looked like he might speak, but he didn't. He nodded. And this time it wasn't smug. It was small, quiet, honest. Torian walked off stage, past the velvet rope, past the rows of people who now knew his name. Ms. Carver met him in the wings. "You okay?" "Yeah," he said. "I think he finally heard me." But one last thing needed to be said, and Torian knew exactly how he wanted to say it. 3 days after the second masterclass, Torian sat at the same kitchen table he'd grown up eating at. Same corner chair. Same chipped edge he always tapped his knuckle against when thinking. There was a new letter on the table. Heavy paper again. This time it was from the Baltimore School for the Arts. They wanted him for a year-long mentorship program. All expenses covered. Travel included. His aunt stared at it like it might explode. "They want you to leave Birmingham for 6 months," she said. Torian was quiet for a moment. Then, "What would you do without me messing up your grocery list?" Jolene smiled. "Just barely. I'd probably start writing it in pen again." He rubbed his hands together slowly, feeling the familiar grooves of his fingertips. "If I go, I won't stop playing. But if I stay, I can keep helping the other kids at the center." "Baby," she said softly, "they'll still be here when you get back. But this window, it may not open again." He didn't answer right away. He listened to the silence between the refrigerator hums, the ticking of the wall clock, the distant sound of a neighbor arguing on the phone. All of it was familiar, comforting, but he could feel something pulling at him too, something bigger than fear. That night, he sat with Ms. Carver at the community center piano. She brought sheet music, his own, the pieces she and Monique had helped him transcribe over the past few weeks, pages that now held his sound in black ink. "They're calling you a symbol now," she said, sliding the pages in front of him. "For people who've been overlooked, for kids who think they have to be perfect to matter." "I'm not perfect," he said. "And that's the point," she replied. "You're not a trophy. You're a reminder." The next day, Torian recorded a message for the younger kids at the center. Ms. Carver filmed it with her phone. He sat on the piano bench, hands folded, face turned toward the light from the window. "I didn't get here because I knew everything," he said. "I got here because I kept playing even when nobody cared. Even when they laughed. Even when they said no." He paused. "Whatever you have, use it. And if they won't open the door, build your own." He smiled, just slightly. Then added, "And don't be afraid to sound different." They uploaded the video that night. It never went viral. No interviews came from it, but it lived where it mattered. In that building, in those kids, in the places where encouragement rarely knocks. Torian left for Baltimore 2 weeks later. He didn't cry at the airport. Jolene didn't either. They stood together, side by side, arms pressed close, quiet in the way that only deep love knows how to be. At the gate, she hugged him once. "You see better than most sighted people I know," she said. He grinned. "I don't need eyes to know where home is." 6 months passed. He came back taller, a little surer. He played at the city's annual festival. He even returned to the conservatory, not to perform, but to sit beside other kids from his side of town as they auditioned. He clapped for every one of them. He gave tips, and most importantly, he listened. Years later, Torian Breyer would go on to compose a full symphony performed in Washington, D.C. with a live broadcast. But when asked in interviews about the moment that changed everything, he always went back to that first masterclass. "That day, I wasn't just playing music," he'd say. "I was showing people how I see the world." Because the truth is, vision isn't always in your eyes. Sometimes it lives in your hands, in your story, in your voice when you speak up, even when they try to keep you quiet. If you felt something in this story, if it reminded you of someone who's been overlooked, ignored, or doubted, share this. Not because of views, but because somewhere out there, another Torian is still waiting to be heard. And if you haven't already, subscribe. More stories like this are coming. Real ones. Ones that matter.